face-to-face, but I suspect it'll be a little while before that becomes viable, unfortunately. But these have worked very well. The Crypto Mondays go back 2.5 years now in London, and we've been very pleased with the way that interest has developed in them. I think we'll probably have more people join over the next 5 to 10 minutes, but it does vary. I think we're moving into, even though the last 4 months might have felt like a holiday for a lot of people, I think we're actually moving into proper holiday period now, and people are beginning to disappear. We have some very good sponsors, Vantage in particular, who are a specialist recruitment agency. They can't be with us tonight, but they've been very supportive. Coin Rule, which is a business that Oleg Gilbertson, who's one of our organizers, is involved in, and Consensus, who have given us space in the city in London to have our meetings, and where I hope we'll be going back to sooner rather than later. With that little introduction, have I forgotten anything, Devin? No.
No, I think that's pretty much covered everything. We are very much looking forward to seeing you guys all again in person one day, and we're hoping it's not going to be too long until then, depending on how the situation in the UK goes moving forward from here. But thank you so much, Larry, for that introduction. Perfect. And I guess without further ado, I'd like to welcome Genevieve to take over from me. I would love if you could just give a quick introduction to yourself and to your company, and then feel free to kick off.
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for having me at Crypto Monday. Caitlin has been trying to get me to drag in for a while, and I'm really honored to be able to have a conversation. And I hope this is really going to be more of a conversation. I could have been, unfortunately, I didn't ask who was going to be, so I could have given you the spiel that I usually do, which is talking about the project and how we have implemented in Haiti. But instead, I thought that I would take you through the journey, which actually has been very interesting from an implementation, because y'all know blockchain. You don't need me to tell you about blockchain, and really sort of looking at some of the observations that I'm seeing in the acceptance of blockchain. And interestingly enough, I just got off a phone call with an organization called Viva Rio, and they're a large Brazilian organization who's been working in Haiti for since 2004, and they've worked with helping to rebuild. And I received a message about a week ago asking me if I would be interested in participating in an IDB call. And I turned around and I said, no way, I'm not doing another grant presentation. And the call is something where actually it's fitting well for blockchain use. So I will take you to AgriLedger, and then I will talk to you about this, because I think there's a lot of opportunity coming in, and they're mostly also in the enterprise space. And I don't think that all organizations are going to be ready to actually implement in there. And this is where the opportunities are for us, not only in building, but also providing consulting support. So to give you a background about me, I come from a very corporate background in that I spent the last 30 years working in the hallowed halls of Chase Manhattan Bank, GE, Hewlett-Packard, and an RBS. And then I took a fall into the whole sort of blockchain when I got my next job. So I decided to leave RBS, and I started working for an institution called Identrust. If you guys don't know Identrust, they were the startup which started the whole identity in an enterprise state of mind, but working with banks. So at one point, their consortium was about 150 banks globally, included HSBC, Barclays, RBS as some of the members, which were the basic members. And the first week on day 2, I was asked by the CEO, if I could go to South Africa, because there was this project that Barclays was looking at, which would be using this thing called blockchain, and that was 2015. And this is where really I started looking at the whole idea of enterprise and identity in the blockchain and how to use in the blockchain. And that project was working with the likes of, this was when Simon Taylor was still over at Barclays. We had Pratik Foundation, R3, when R3 hadn't announced yet, so that was in April 2015. There were probably 10 of them running around at that point. And then finally, we were looking at also Jed from what's it called again? He had just left Ripple at that time. So it was he left Ripple in February, so March, April, that was just coming out, and this is when they were just starting. So when I'm looking at that system, what was interesting was how would you use the technology to create trust with young girls by allowing them to save money, to then learn financial inclusion and become an influencer in their household. Because guess what, in South Africa, that 16-year-old has a mother who probably has a shebeen. The shebeen is employing a bunch of people, or her father has a repair. And how do you get digital currency? Because I think that's really what's going to propel. And I'm starting to see things which are really taking us into that direction. That was a seminal moment for me, because I realized that we could use the technology to create trust. But that wasn't just a financial trust, because if I can prove that I have given something over to you, and as a escrow, which is what we do with the bank, if we prove that we have given an escrow, then that means that I still retain ownership. So if we take that as a premise, this is actually what we started doing in Haiti. So the producer produces something, there is someone which provides him a service, and that service is then paid for. So the implementation that we have done in Haiti, and we started in February with a pilot run, a dry run, using the system, and they went live on May 1st. At this point, we believe, because they still haven't done everything, that the value that went through the system is about 12,000. And let's not forget, this is during the time of COVID. So May 1st, everybody in the world now is under lockdown. So about 100 farmers were touched for about 7 weeks of service. And they transported about, I'd say, 12,000 kilos of mangoes to the US. I'm actually having some of that data looked at, in that the actual numbers are, if the farmer had actually been able to sell in Haiti, he would have gotten maybe anywhere from 25 cents for the dozen up till 94 cents. By sending it to the US, where he continued to have ownership until the sale, he was able to then pay everyone down the value chain, and his take was about $4.84. So if we think about this, that's almost a 5x increase of what would have been a normal income if he had access to market. And all the farmers also received most of them asked for cash. And this is a fundamental issue around, the use of digital. People will take money into a bank account in many of those parts of the world and then drain the money out of the bank account because they don't trust. So we need to sort of look at how do we create trust. And if you think about it, if they could be able, so this is where with COVID, P2P contactless is becoming much more important. So how do you gain trust around that, and also create trust around the fact that the money is not going to disappear? So we have been doing Haiti, and I have actually to say that I was well prepared because last August, Haiti started really flaring up. And on the 23rd of September, we were supposed to go live. And the car carrying the officers who were going to work with the farmers got hijacked. And they had to be released, actually, and ransom had to be paid for them to release them. So that put the whole going live on ice because the country went into what was a geopolitical lockdown. As such, we actually continued to build the software between October to November on basically remotely. So when they went live in February, I thought, okay, this is just a test, so I don't need to go. I'll go when they go live in April. And then in April, no one could move anywhere. So which meant that the whole interaction has had to be done remotely using. So we were expert at using webinars or or those kind of things prior. But while sitting there, one of the things that came up is obviously what we're doing in Haiti, take a mango from a farmer and I can trace it back all the way to the person who purchased it at the store in the US. Because throughout the journey, when he brings in, we know the number that's bought by the farmer. It goes through the process and then get boxed, and each mango has a QR code. So with COVID, what we've found is the issue is not supply chain being broken. It's really around the value chain. The value chain, which is, so when we were talking about the issues with masks, when the masks flared up at the end of March, it wasn't that we couldn't manufacture the masks in the US or in the UK. It was that the fiber, the plastic fiber, which goes in between the mask, is only done in China. So then what was happening is things coming in from China, and so many people coming in through the process of trying to broker, you didn't know in reality what you were getting. So that's why we also had this announcement by IBM where they started registering suppliers on the blockchain. But I don't think that's enough, because I know that you are who you say you are and you are where you are. How do I know that what you have produced is not being tampered or is not being copied? So as a group, we sat down, and that was as a result actually of the grant process. We realized that going for AgriLedger wasn't the right thing to do, because I think that we have, as a world, we haven't yet realized how deep the whole food issue is going to be as a result of COVID, because we haven't felt that yet, but it's about to come. And last week, the FAO, WHO, World Food Program, they were all talking about that. And it is a very complex thing. And I think that there is a very great opportunity there for blockchain technology. But going back, so what we then said is, if I can trace a mango all the way to an individual, why can't I trace a test, a flow test, or a PCR test from the manufacturer supplier all the way to the individual who takes it? Because there is a lot, what we're seeing a lot on the other side of the blockchain solution is a lot of people talking about issuing a digital identity immunity for COVID tests. Because I don't know about you, I'm not looking forward to any PCR test every time I travel. But fundamentally also, if we think about economies, are we going to now run a very closed economy to where it's only the borders? You remember how my president was talking about putting a wall for the US. Well, guess what? COVID has put a wall for the US, because nobody wants to have the US come in. But at some point, we in Europe will say, okay, the Americans have it under control, so we'll allow them to come back in. But what happens to developing economies such as Brazil, or countries such in Africa, what is going to happen to them? The issue is going to be that we need to be assured that they can test. So how do we bring that assurance? Well, it's not, we all know it's not a centralized database, because one of the big thing about blockchain is being able to have multiple parties verifying one another. So we have actually built the solution to provide the ability from the manufacturer all the way to the customer being able to trace it using both NFC tags and RFIDs. So the RFID then allows to have what's called a crypto seal, and letting it, so as soon as the box is open, we can know that it has opened. So these are my personal things that I'm looking at in the blockchain space of how we can actually start looking at building what I call enterprise solutions. So Devin, I'd seen there was a question. Should I look at it? And then after that, I can talk about some of the things, the other things that we're seeing from a societal standpoint, which I think, digital currencies coming in.
Sure. So I actually dropped that question in there myself. But I'm also kind of curious what inspired your journey into going into AgriLedger and working with Haiti, taking this path kind of into blockchain, because there's so many other use cases. But my question that I typed through was, what are some of the biggest challenges that you faced so far working with this implementation? Because I'm quite familiar with a couple of use cases that have tried it in other African countries. I know Cameroon tried one with goats. I think way back when Walmart tried another supply chain tracking use case, but I'm more interested in kind of what some of the challenges were that you're facing and how you're overcoming them.
By having screaming match in the afternoon. I mean, that's the reality. So the biggest challenge has actually in the implementation has actually been people understanding that you need to put the information as it's happening, not write it on a piece of paper and then go and take care of it later. The protagonists, or let's say the stakeholders which were supposed to participate, some of them never showed. So my conversation this afternoon with the Haitian government was, you never provided the standard operating procedure. And you wouldn't have seen these unless you were on the ground. So we're not suggesting that we're not going to change it, but I'm not going to change it in a way which is inflexible by your view of how a digital solution should work. So those are some of the challenges. And then I think also what we're doing is a bit different. We are not just we are just having pure blockchain. So we're using a R3 Corda. And the reason for choosing that technology was that it allows for multiple stakeholders to fulfill the same role, but not be privy to one another's data. And so then you also have the overlaying that you can do using notary nodes, so that you end up within the application without having to add additional, the ability to sort of exchange information without exchanging the data. So if you say, is it red? You ask that question of the notary, and the notary checks, and I tell the notary it's red, but you don't get that it's red. So it says to you it's a match, rather than telling you what exactly the color is. But you kind of know what it is at that point. So now that what that allows them to do, unlike what I understood Hyperledger did, Hyperledger moves everything across all the different nodes. So now you can keep that information, which is, let's say, in node 1, so participant 1, in participant 1 until it's necessary to actually move it to maybe participant 4. So participant 2 and 3 didn't need certain information, so they didn't need to provide it. And if participant 3 has information that one never needs to know, they don't need to know. So now the next challenge we're trying to look at is how do you create, because this is really kind of a federated system where you get to know information on base of a need to and participation. So how do you then provide data and create an explorer, which it's both a private permission to write, but it will be public data, but with looking, so an open data principle of actually supporting also what needs to be in the public realm and what does not need to be. So there are complexity that we are seeing there. So it's not just with tracking the mango, it's about what is the financial. So
Yeah, there's another question in the chat here from David Moore. He says, "Thank you for the talk. With the mangoes, I see the growers earned more. How was the experience for the purchasers of the mangoes?"
actually, this is probably also where the key is. You need to start with something that everybody wants. So when you go to the Mango Board in the US, which is the organization which makes for the whole cell, they're basically an organization which it's called the Mango Board. There's 5 types of mangoes which come to the US, and a couple of them you find in more than one place. So the Tommy, you can find it in Ecuador and in Chile. But the Haitian mango, which is called Madame Francis, you can only find it in Haiti. Nobody else has been able to make it happen, not even with grafting. So if you start with a commodity, and that's why we are actually look at the produce as a commodity. If you look at it as a commodity and then start with something which is rare and wanted, then you create the understanding from people on how it can be made. And you start being able to, one of the questions you had asked is, how do I get to Haiti? I didn't choose Haiti. Haiti chose me. I was born there. But in reality, 2 years ago, the World Bank put out a call because they had been working in something called a DAIE, which is a development aid investment, which was looking at how to empower the bottom 40% of poverty. And when you look at a country, any country in the world, which is agrarian, you're going to find that usually those are subsistence farmers. So the idea was, if you could empower them by allowing them to continue to own the goods, you could then create the process where you're de-risking the value chain by making sure you are putting more risk on the farmer, but you're also de-risking the service provider in that they are not buying something hoping to sell it and receiving half junk. So they get to pick what is good. And then from the seller of the mango, which is actually in the US, they love it because they now know that they're getting a product which is following certain rules, such as it needs to, you need to evidence that you've done certain steps in the processing. You need to, so it's a sort of certification. You also need to get it out of the country within 72 hours, which means by the time it gets to their lot, it's not been in so much heat and it's spoiled. So it's an education process. And part of the challenge has been trying to go live with something like this during coronavirus, has meant that next year we'll be hopefully better prepared. But they're about to go live with avocado next in the next couple of weeks.
That's very exciting. I was actually thinking earlier when you started discussing the use case of mangoes, did you ever look into the IBM mangoes use case with Walmart back in 2016?
That is the Haitian mango, but remember that was the Haitian mango that they looked at, but there it didn't go from, so there's what we're hoping to do with our platform, the ethos of it is about the democratization of access, so that the farmer, it doesn't matter if he sells to Walmart or if he sells to Albertson or to whomever, or even to you as an individual, you are privy to the information as to how that journey has been versus so Walmart, you get, this is a blockchain thing, you're able to trace back very quickly to the data because that's now digital and no one can really keep the information. But the Walmart environment right now is more about Walmart using certain farmers and having to give them that information. Now, that precludes that the farmer is going to sell you 100% of their good to one store, and that's not the reality. So the next thing I mentioned that we were talking to Viva Rio. One of the things I want to do is, how do we get to a circular economy with this? Which means to say, this produce is going to go international market. This is going to be local market. This is going to be for transformation. And this is animal feed, which means at the end, you have less waste. Because in the system that we have designed right now, there's one bucket, international. You come in with 100 and 60 of them are accepted. The 30, you have to figure out what to do with it yourself. But imagine if now you're really giving access to market to the farmers, and this is what we presented around tourism. So IDB has just put out a call, which about a couple of weeks ago, which is looking at the issue of COVID-19 in the industry of tourism. So if we think about it, the Caribbean is where everybody's been going for this, not even for the summer, just all the time. But no one is able to travel safely or be assured that they can be safe while traveling. So which means that countries such as Jamaica, which had 31% of their economy being done by direct tourism, and then 41 by indirect tourism, are going to be greatly affected. So they want to know, how do you create more sort of a circular economy, reduce food waste, and then retrain people. And I think that there is a great opportunity, to really empower with the use and knowledge of blockchain. Because one of the things, I don't know how many of you are actually looking normally for people to work on your project. That's like the holy grail, because you can only go India, China, not even China, Ukraine, Russia, Israel, and then you start mostly UK and US. And those are expensive resources. If we want to do a small project where it doesn't really matter, yeah, you go, but when you start wanting to do enterprise system, you're looking at very expensive resources. So why not try to have to where you can create more education around that and train youth who will be able to become your future blockchain developers or Python developers or whatever it is, but really looking at technology. Because one of the things that COVID has done, in my point of view, which is great, is that it has made it easier for us to learn how to communicate remotely. Yes, we want to reach out and touch someone, but we're now creating trust. So that's a change in the trust. We are trusting people that we're meeting online that we may never get to touch, so which means we can go further afield.
I think you mentioned some really interesting points there about both the circular economy and about how we're changing in terms of trust online. I think both are very important too, how our thoughts are starting to change recently. I just wanted to mention again to the floor, please feel free to ask your questions in the chat bar, or to simply unmute yourselves and ask away. But Genevieve, I'll let you continue.
So one of the things that I've found very interesting, I don't know if you guys have been following the remittance debacle, because that's the only way to call it, the debacle. So the World Bank has announced that due to COVID, there's now going to be about 100 billion, so 20% shortfall in remittance. And that is due to individuals, like let's say in Saudi Arabia or in the UAE, who had jobs. They end up getting sick, or the the company closes down and they lose their job. What was happening is those individuals were actually sending money back home. The issue is not only the person receiving the money, which was using it maybe for food or to send their kids to school. Actually, one of the bigger issues is the central banks of those countries was using that remittance to actually shore up the balance sheet by getting loans from private companies and also tax revenue. So that tax revenue is going to drop. I was speaking to someone and they mentioned that, let's say, Haiti saw a blip of an increase, but that is not expected to last very long. Haiti's GDP is 25% of the GDP is dependent on remittance. This is when also being able to, as individual, exchange value using digital currency is going to come to play. So I really think that because of COVID, we're probably going to see better traction in Libra than would have been before, because more people are going to be needing to make that exchange. And somehow I think more people are going to trust in Libra, in Facebook, than they're going to trust in their local bank. They think at that point their government can do something about that. Should I keep going? Because I keep watching different things to make. So one things which is very interesting today, I attended 101 Blockchain, and I don't know how many of you are aware, but UNICEF has now created a fund, which is a crypto fund. So what they do is they are basically acting like a venture to fund projects. And the project has an ability to receive either cash or receive token. Now, the one thing about it is that if you take it in tokens, then have to pay the people working for you in token. So in a way, they are basically fostering this new way of working, because if I have to pay, they want you to show that from my level, when I'm paying for my services, I'm paying in crypto. Not that I'm transferring them into cash, but it's quite interesting when you think about it. So that means organizations at the UN level are now starting to accept the concept of digital assets. The other one, which is also now clamoring for using blockchain technology, is the FAO. So many of you are probably aware that World Food Program has been using it for a while. But last week, there was a call regarding the cost of food and nutrition globally. It's very dismal when we look at zero hunger being the number 2 goal for the Sustainable Development Goals. And instead of going where there's a reduction, in the last 10 years, there's been an increase of about 60 million people. In the last year, 2019 to 2020, there was 10 million added, and they are expecting with COVID to see 100 million added to the rank. And that's also with an issue where about 371 million children, which were getting a daily meal, that was probably their only daily meal, are not going to be receiving this, which means from a health perspective, now we're looking at increased cases of measles and childhood illnesses, and furthermore, more wasting. So they are, so the conversation with Via Rio that I was having today is they said there is a need to use blockchain technology to record that information, to be able to capture that data and create immutability around that data, to then be able to have truth in how they're making the decision. Because obviously we all know sometimes there's a bit of a corruptness in the information being pulled out. So I think that we are going to see a change in how the perception of the technology is. So there's a maturation of that, because places like the World Bank and others are starting to see a definite need for it. Any other questions, please?
Is AgriLedger at all involved with UNICEF or any of these organizations yet?
So I am applying for the UNICEF grant, and they didn't answer my question, so I'm trying to get an answer. Because what it is that they seem to be still at the very early prototype. We have built, so the solution that we've built for the World Bank is an open source, will be available open source when we release in November. But we are also looking at some of the, to me, some of the challenges around open source is you need to build a community and you need to have a lot of cash to deal with that. And the project that we did in Haiti, just for disclosure, is not a grant. It is a revenue generating. We are looking at applying for the UNICEF grant, but very little of that cash will go into the actual build of the application. I want to put it more toward the training. My point of view is this idea of saying, if you build a well and you go away and you haven't taught them how to maintain that well, it will be dry thereafter and you have not really given water. So that's why that whole aspect of training and maintaining, and the reality, so one of the things you asked about the challenge of implementation, guess what? Internet doesn't work in certain places. SMS works. Electricity goes down for several hours or for a day. People don't have electricity at home. They have to walk maybe a mile to get their phone charged. So we all know that if our smartphone can spend the day without being charged. So you need to look at the socio-economic and the realities of on the ground and allow mechanisms for them to be able to communicate. So we communicate with the farmers by providing them confirmation of where that. So if I had something that you were carrying for me, I want to know that it reaches its destination. I want to know how much actually has been paid for it. And from that, I agree what is going to go to, I've agreed what's going to you. So which means I can make the calculation of what is going to come back to me. One of the assumption we make a lot of time is around illiteracy. Illiteracy means inability to read and write. That doesn't mean the inability to recognize numbers and to put value in those numbers. So if you have a $10 note put in front of you, you know it's $10. If you try to switch it for a one, if you can't read, you know that the image doesn't match your expectation. So if we take that as a standpoint, then we can work with these communities to create. So we've been talking a lot about smart cities. I'm trying to say create smart communities where you now bring in that trust to them by using a technology. They don't need to know it's blockchain. They just need to know that nobody can mess it around, that no government can do a change to it. And that's the clear difference. So create smart communities where individual can feel secure to exchange value with one another. So digital currency, digital representation of value, and then know that when something goes afar from their house, that it will reach its destination and no one in between will have the ability to stop it and keep them from getting what is due to them.
I think with ideas like this, it's always quite difficult to come in with a new way of doing things. So going from maybe the traditional way of how the communities have been doing it before and moving into a smart communities or a different type of system can often be less appealing to a lot of people that have been doing it the same way over and over. And a lot of this we talk about when we talk about crypto economics or incentivizing communities through crypto economics and the way that we design the system so that it benefits everyone in a way that they understand the incentives. Because people might understand, yes, it's good for us to be able to trust where the information is coming from or be able to verify it. But if people don't understand why that is important, then it makes it difficult again all over again.
So one way of doing that is to put money in their pocket.
Yes, that's exactly what I think I was thinking, is how are you incentivizing the communities, I guess, or giving back to the communities in that sense? Is it more
Yes,
that you're
getting back.
incentivizing?
Yeah. So if you think about it, I mean, I was doing the numbers. So in, let's say, the $10,000 that went, profit that went from the sale of the mango, so the value. What was happening before is the farmer would have sold it to the exporter. The exporter would have paid them an amount which was maybe 20 cents to maybe 94 cents. And that's done, gone, no more. Then the exporter would export it to the US. Now, I don't have any proof of it, but you start wondering, why would they bring back all the cash into Haiti? Because they've received, let's say they've received 6,000. There is no reason for them to bring the 6,000 back to Haiti to then get taxed on that. So you might decide to actually keep some of that money in country and not repatriate. And also it's one individual at that point receiving. So let's just say they bring back the 6,000. It's one individual receiving 6,000 versus now you have actually built a whole value chain back where that 6,000 is getting spread much more evenly across. So they might make only 3,000, but that difference of 3,000 is now going into the community, which then can start asking for more services, innovating, because I think that innovation of even asking somebody to support you and help you is what's going to make a difference. So if we can get them to that point, they can now start hiring somebody, like instead of me having to worry of putting it on the donkey and getting it down, I hire somebody who's going to do that job for me. So which means you are doing more in terms of economic good of that community. And they can then, so I was watching something on WHP, which distributed about $75, yes, to a bunch of women. It was very interesting to see how some of them used it. Some used it to buy food for now, and one decided to buy 2 goats because she figured she bought much less food and she bought 2 goats so that she could then be able to create a business. So that's what the difference is that you're creating opportunity for people to actually economically be much more successful. So entrepreneurship, really. And, we like to think about, when we talk about entrepreneurship, we talk seed growth. Guess what? That's farming to me.
Yeah, definitely. We have a question here from Robin Davis. From a bank and central bank point of view, Finality.org are building a PVP or DVP settlement system of financial transactions with legal finality, capable of interoperating across multiple business platforms. This will be independent companies seeded by a consortium of 15 plus global banks and 5 central banks. It should bring more stability and confidence in the next few years of any payments. Libra, on the other hand, is propriety.
I love it, Robin. That's all I have to say. No, one of the things that so actually, if you can speak to this, one of the issues I'm running into is you need to, we all talk about the crypto or even looking at a digital currency, the central bank digital currency. Let's say China is making a lot of noise these days. What I would need to do is to be able to have money paid into a central account using a blockchain smart contract to say this is a distribution and remove. So I'm a treasurer by background. So I think, in my point of view, the blockchain is actually what we've been looking for in Treasury forever, which was the in-house banking. So on behalf of payment and on behalf receiving. So an account centralized receives. Once we know that the money has been received, then we do the distribution. So we're doing that at the distribution of the level of the Haitian segment. But one of the broken things for me is that the the broker is receiving. So which means I always have to trust the broker in receiving that money, versus I can trust him to sell, and as soon as the sale happens, then he gets paid from the system, and the system says this to the broker, this for taxes, this to the individual who have participated. So I would definitely love to talk to you more about that, because one of the issues as a startup, the banks are saying to me, we don't trust you. We'll trust the system, but we don't trust you. But where is the money going to drop is really the key. And this is, in my point of view, changing. And Libra is more to me than it's proprietary. So I wasn't saying that I was espousing or thinking Libra is a great thing, but I was thinking more that because individuals are going to need a mechanism to exchange value, that they're willing, the same way we're willing to exchange information on Facebook because we quote unquote trust Facebook, we would see this being more acceptable.
Yeah, I mean, Facebook, yeah, they're obviously in it to make money for themselves and not for the greater good, but just for their own greater good. But the finality, I mean, it does come with legal finality. So when the tokens or whatever it is are exchanged, then that is, you do own what you've been given, and that's it. So exactly. It should get rid of all intermediaries, especially in the banking world. I read actually the other day that for cross-country payments, it can actually go through about 4 or 5 different currencies and 4 or 5 different banks to get to its destination, which obviously takes time.
So if you're doing USD, it is exactly. So if you're doing GBP to USD, you're going to hit at least 2 banks on each side. And if I'm doing from USD to Haiti, so remember, one of the problems with the US also is that unless you have operating branch in country, you cannot receive directly. You can only have another bank. So you need to have an account at, let's say, Bank of America or Wells Fargo, who will receive it. And your account with them is only, quote unquote, a remittance to bring back into your home country. So you can't transact really.
I mean, there will be a finality blockchain or distributed ledger in each jurisdiction. So there'll be one for US dollar, there'll be one for GBP, there'll be one for Japanese yen, etc., etc. And each of those blockchains will actually interoperate between them. Have you seen
the article that came out from the World Bank Payments Center department?
I've got so many documents. They keep going out in documents left, right, and center. I may have done. I don't know.
I'll put the link in a minute, but that was an interesting one.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, and I would definitely love to talk more to you about this.
I worked with them for 6 months last year on some enterprise architecture stuff, but I've still got friends who are there. In fact, they're all friends. It's quite a small company at the moment. But, yeah, have a look at their website. They have a lot of information there as well.
Okay, will do.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Robin. There's a comment here from Chris as well. I think he had to shoot off now, but he just says, thank you so much for a great call. None of us will forget the importance of the mango and our understanding of COVID's impact on trust, verification, and blockchain. Excellent work. We have about 5 minutes left of this call. I wanted to ask if any of you have any questions to end us off with, or any closing thoughts.
So I have closing thoughts. I mean, this is a journey. And I think that maybe what COVID has done for us is actually create this mechanism now where we are actually getting more trust into the power of this technology. It's kind of weird to say, but I think 2018, 2019 was the year where people went, oh, this technology is only created to create tokens, and that's the only value. So we see a lot of things about supply chain, and I like to think it's not really about the supply chain, it's the value chain. And that's what the Bitcoin has been about. It's about the exchange of value. So now the key that I always learn in banking, it's not about where the government moves money or the bank moves money, is does Devin and I, if we do a transaction, how can we prove without having to bring in somebody else to verify it? And that's the waste of time and money and expenses. So if now we don't need to bring an intermediary to check that that has occurred, then that exchange of value that needs to happen, or the obligation that has been created, needs to then take place without delay. And that's where there is advantages. I saw what Hamid said, the first world government. I think that you're going to find, remember, when it came to the cell phone, we all have them now and we use them ubiquitously in the first world. But mobile started first in Africa because there was necessity. So I wonder if cashless is actually going to come from what we call the emerging economies, where we as a first world, or let's say developed world, or whichever way you want to call it, have now gotten that opportunity because we now start to understand. I would love to be the fly on the wall to understand what's happening in Germany, because I know one of the things I hated the most is going to Germany and I have to take out euro because they don't want to take my credit card. So what's going to happen?
Yeah, Germany is still very much a cash reliant country. Wait, are we still? Is it frozen? I can't tell. Oh, you're back. Okay. Thank you so much for your time and for your insights today. I thoroughly enjoyed the talk. I enjoyed the more casual nature of this presentation as well. I think so. There's a couple of people as well that said that they really enjoyed the session, really insightful session. Thank you so much for all of your insights. If you have any links that you'd like to send through, you guys can join the Crypto Mondays Telegram. Keep the conversation going in there. It would actually be lovely to keep the conversation going there as well. We'll post any links as well that come through here. But yeah, thank you again so much. We really appreciate your time.
Thank you very much, and thank you for having me. And it was a pleasure for my first Crypto Monday.
Do come, Genevieve, do come back and join us, okay?
Yeah, yes, for sure.
We'd love to have you.
You know, Oleg and I
in person.
did SLP together, by the way. So we've known each other almost 4 years now.
And if you guys have any feedback as well for the sessions, if you have any suggestions for improvement, any other speakers you'd like to see, we can see if we can get them in for another round. Please send us your feedback. You can drop me a message directly via Telegram. You can reach out to us in the channel. But yeah, that's us. That's another Crypto Monday. Thank you all so much, Caitlin.
Thank you all. Thank you.
Cool.
Thank you, Genevieve.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.